I welcome you to high school biology. If you haven't subscribed, ensure you do so. So in this video, we'll be discussing transport systems in the human body. So basically, there are two types of transport systems in the body. There is circulatory system and also the lymphatic system. So in this video, we'll be discussing about the blood circulatory system. So the circulatory system pumps and directs blood cells and substances carried in blood to all tissues of the body. It includes both the blood circulatory system and also the lymphatic system. So like I've mentioned earlier, in this video we'll be discussing the blood circulatory system. So this system is made up of the heart, it's made up of the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. So this is a diagrammatic representation of blood circulation. So let's look now at the organs in the blood circulatory system. So our first organ we are going to look at will be the heart, right? So the heart, this is a muscular organ that pumps blood around the body through blood vessels. So it is also important to take note of the type of muscle that is found in the walls of the heart. So this type of muscle is the cardiac muscle. So cardiac muscle in the four chambers of the heart contracts rhythmically, pumping the blood through the circulatory system. So we need also to take note that the heart is divided into the right and left side by a wall or a middle wall called the septum. So this wall that separates the heart into right and left side is called the septum. Then it is also important to take note that each side has an upper chamber. So each side of the heart has an upper chamber known as the atrium, then a lower chamber known as a ventricle. So these are the things we should take note of. The atria receive blood from the veins, which they pump to the ventricles. The ventricles receive blood from the atria and pump it to the heart, and pump it out of the heart through the arteries. So the ventricles, after receiving blood from the atria, they now pump it out of the heart through the arteries. So at this point now, it is also important to take note of this point where we say the heart, the left side of the heart or the left ventricle of the heart has a thick muscle because it needs to pump blood out of the heart to a longer distance. So you find that this ventricle has a thick muscle. The heart receives blood from blood vessels called veins. These include the vena cava. So the vena cava is an example of veins which carries blood from the rest of the body to the right atrium, and the pulmonary vein which carries blood from the lungs to the left atrium. So in the body we have four pulmonary veins, two coming from each kidney, two coming from the right kidney and two coming from the left kidney. So when we add them, in total they are four. The heart pumps blood out of the heart pumps blood out through blood vessels called arteries. So these include the aorta, which carries blood from the left ventricle to the rest of the body, and the pulmonary artery, which carries blood from the right ventricle to the lungs. So when the blood is carried from the right ventricle to the lungs, this is for the purposes of oxygenation. The wall of the heart receives blood from the coronary artery. So this is the blood vessel that supplies the heart with blood, which is the oxygenated blood. Right, so this coronary artery branches from the aorta. Then at this point now, we'll be looking at the valves of the heart. So these valves, they are important as they prevent the backflow of blood. So the heart also contains valves which are responsible for keeping blood flowing in one direction, by thereby preventing backflow. So when blood is flowing in one direction, this prevents the backflow of blood. The valves found between the atria and the ventricles are called atrioventricular valves. Then the one on the right side is called the tricuspid valve, while the one on the left is called the bicuspid valve. So we are going to look at these valves on a diagram that is just in our next lecture slides. It is also important to note that those valves found between the ventricles and the arteries are called semilunar valves. So we have the semilunar valve found at the beginning of the aorta is called the aortic semilunar valve, while the one at the beginning of the pulmonary artery is known as the pulmonary semilunar valve. So we'll look at the diagram and see or appreciate what these valves are. So this is the diagram we have here. So here we can see this is the aorta. So these are the pulmonary veins. They receive oxygenated blood from the lungs. So the blood enters the left atrium. Okay, then this is the bicuspid valve we mentioned, which is also called the mitral valve. Then this is the blood enters the left ventricle. So we can tell that the mass here, the mass of the left ventricle is thick as compared to the mass of the left ventricle. So this is just for the purposes of pumping blood with a higher pressure, as blood needs to go to a longer distance. So we can see the mass here, the muscle is this wall is muscular. So the blood here now has to enter the aorta. So here you find the aortic valve, which we mentioned, right? So it goes to the aorta. So the aorta now branches into different arteries that supply blood or oxygenated blood to the rest of the body parts. So after blood has been supplied to the rest of the body parts, it now comes back to the heart through the vena cava. So this, we have the superior vena cava here, we have the inferior vena cava here. So here the superior vena cava is bringing the blood from the upper superior part of the body. Then this is bringing blood from the inferior part of the body. So when it enters the right atrium, okay, so it enters the right atrium. This is the deoxygenated blood, meaning the blood which is insufficient, which has insufficient oxygen. So we call it deoxygenated blood. So it enters the right atrium. Then here, this is the tricuspid valve that we mentioned earlier in our discussion. Then the blood enters the right ventricle, which is here. It is less muscular because it does not need to pump blood to a longer distance. It only pumps blood to the lungs for the purpose of oxygenation. So at this point, blood is pumped to the lungs through this the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery branches. This goes to the like it's by its name, right pulmonary artery. So it goes to the right kidney. Sorry, it goes to the right lung. Then this one, left pulmonary artery, it goes to the left lung. So this is for the blood to be oxygenated. So this is the wall that we said that it separates the heart into two sides, right and left side. So this wall is called the septum. So at this point, I think we are done looking at the diagram of the heart. So this is also another diagram of the heart. So this is the pulmonary vein, the blood coming from the lungs. It enters the left atrium. Here, this is the bicuspid valve or mitral valve. Then here, this is the left ventricle, which is more muscular. Then it's pumped through out of the heart through the aorta, which later branches off into other arteries. So this is the aortic semilunar valve, which is here. Then the muscle here is the septum, the one that separates the heart into two sides, left and right hand side. Then this side we have the vena cava. The blood goes into the right atrium, passes through the tricuspid valve, which is here. Then it goes into the right ventricle. The right ventricle, as we can see, it's less muscular because it pumps blood to a shorter distance, so doesn't really need a lot of pressure. So the blood is pumped through the pulmonary artery, which branches into left pulmonary artery and right pulmonary artery, going to the left lung and also right lung. So this is also another diagrammatic representation of the heart. So functioning of the heart. The wall of the heart is made of a type of muscle called the cardiac muscle, which has the following characteristics. So this the cardiac muscle, it has the following characteristics. Among others, it is myogenic, meaning it is self-stimulating. The stimulus for its construction comes from the muscle itself. The stimulus for contraction originates from a special patch of cardiac muscle called the pacemaker or sinoatrial node, found in the right atrium. Then another characteristic of the heart is that it does not develop fatigue. Then its cells are branched and have a single nucleus. So these are just some of the characteristics of the heart. Contraction of the cardiac muscle is called systole, whilst relaxation of cardiac muscle is called diastole. The sequence of events that occur during a single heartbeat are called the cardiac cycle. The events of cardiac cycle are summarized as follows. So this is the summary of the events of the cardiac cycle. So arterial, systole or systole. This is just the contraction of the walls of the atria. So the left and right atria, they contract at the same time. Meaning when they contract, they pump blood into the ventricles. The tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve, they open. Then there's a pause. Then also ventricular systole, meaning contraction of the walls of the ventricles. So these ventricles, they also contract at the same time, and once they contract, they are pushing blood out of the heart. So if it's the left ventricle, it pushes blood through the aorta to the rest of the body parts. Then the right ventricle, it pushes blood through the pulmonary pulmonary artery to the lungs for oxygenation. So then now diastole, the relaxation of walls of the entire so diastole, the relaxation of the walls of the entire heart. Note that there is a pause between atrial systole and ventricular systole. So this is the pause that we mentioned here. So it is important to take note of that. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so.